Look at that.
Yeah.
And it's made in USA. Should be made in Sweden. I don't trust Americans on these Volvo engines. What's going on, everyone? Jacob and Cory here from FCP Euro, and this is our original 850 engine. If you haven't seen the 850 project, this is the original engine that we pulled out of the car with over 300,000 miles on it. We took the car to the dyno with this engine, and it surprised us with how much power it made. Despite how gross it looks and how many miles it has, we were all curious, what does it look like inside? So what are we going to be doing today, Cory?
Yeah, so I'm dying to see what a 300,000 mile Volvo engine looks like. So we're going to basically strip it down to a bare block. So first we're going to leak down it, see what those numbers are, flip it over, take the pan off, look inside there. Then we're going to take off all the timing gear, the cam gears, the cylinder head cover, rip the head off, rip the piston rod assemblies out, and just take a good look at everything.
All right, Cory's got to work on the race cars, so we got to get this done by lunchtime. So let's get right into the time lapse.
The last time we heard this engine was right after we pulled it off the dyno for the very first time, where it made a whopping 140 wheel horsepower. Although it didn't sound very happy afterwards, it was still running.
Well, all these spark plugs look pretty much perfectly even. They're all worn pretty evenly.
They look good.
They look good. I mean, I put new spark plugs in it before we went to the dyno, so they don't have a whole lot of miles on them.
Yeah. Ceramic looks good. Yeah. Very nice. So now let's put number one at top dead center.
Before we take anything apart, we thought it would be a good idea to perform a leak down test to see the general health of the engine. This test is a quick way to determine if your engine is healthy or in need of a complete rebuild. An engine leak down test is basically a compression test in reverse. Instead of measuring the engine's ability to create pressure, compressed air is forced into the cylinder through the spark plug hole. Yeah. On the tester, one gauge measures the pressure of the air going into the cylinder, and the other measures the percentage of air escaping or leaking from the cylinder. Now, no engine will have 0% leak down, but approximately 5 to 10% loss indicates the engine's in pretty good running order. The larger the leak down percentage, the more likely you are to have worn piston rings, burnt or stuck open valves, leaking head gaskets, and so on.
I put it at top dead center, rocked a little bit just to make sure all the valves are nice and seated. Set the leak down tester to 100 psi, so it would be a percentage change, as it leaks down. So now you can hear the air escaping through the crankcase, so it's blowing past the rings.
300,000 mile rings.
10% leak down, not so bad.
Not too bad. So this engine probably would, consume a little bit of oil, but not anything that's really out of the ordinary.
It's pretty good. Usually you want within 7%. I mean, on a race motor, I would want to see less than 5%. But 300,000 mile Volvo, 10%.
That's pretty good.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pop all the timing stuff off.
With the leak down test completed, it was time to start digging further into this white block, starting from the top and moving down. First thing was to remove all the timing components off the engine. Here you will find the timing belt, tensioner, and all associated pulleys. This being an early N Whiteblock, we have a hydraulic tensioner and non-VVT cam gears. One interesting note is that these cam gears are actually slotted a bit to allow for some adjustment of the cam timing. Most of these timing components should be replaced at the 80 to 100,000 mile mark, and this engine was certainly due for a refresh of the timing components.
It's not awful.
It's not like it was going to snap.
It's not terrible. It does have marks still left on it though.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And it's made in USA. Should be made in Sweden. I don't trust Americans on these Volvo engines.
Replacing the water pump is also a fairly common practice, as it is more accessible with the timing components removed. Now it's really time to see the inside of this engine.
There goes.
One thing that is interesting to note is that this cover is not a traditional valve cover. Unlike a regular valve cover, the cam caps or cam journals are actually housed on the inside of the cover, which the cams ride on. And the condition of these cam journals and the camshafts themselves will be the first indication of the amount of wear this engine has. And to our absolute surprise, all the cam journals look to be in wonderful condition. We did notice a little bit of wear on the tips of the cam lobes, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Next thing we're going to do is before we pull the lifters out, we're going to mark them for which ones they are. So one thing to note too is that this is an N engine which has hydraulic lifters versus the revised RN engine. They switched over to solid lifter design. So Cory's marking intake and exhaust side, I for intake, E for exhaust, and starting with 1 from the front of the engine, back. Yeah.
With the lifters marked, we can now easily crank off the cylinder head bolts.
Just got to pop it.
Oh yeah, so another thing too about these Volvo engines is the head bolts are torqued to a ridiculous amount.
You don't say.
Do you actually know the torque spec?
Yeah, that's about 5-6 million foot-pounds. The good thing is the heads never lift, Cory.
Good thing.
They don't really lift. They don't blow head gaskets. I mean, it happens. You do something really stupid, like overheat it.
It's important to follow the proper sequence when removing the cylinder head bolts evenly. With the head bolts and lifters removed, we can now lift the cylinder head off the block. With the head lifted off, we now had our first glimpse into the bottom end of the engine. And looking at the cylinder walls, we were amazed to find all of the factory cross-hatching still clearly visible even after over 300,000 miles of wear. Just a reminder, we don't know who or how this engine was maintained, or really any of its history.
There's some silicone on there.
There's some silicone on there. Reuse it. Oh, now it's not, Cory. There you can see it's open deck design. Good for cooling.
Once we remove the head gasket, we can now see the open deck design of this block.
Yeah, basically open deck means the upper portion of the sleeve is not supported on the block. So you see how it's completely open? So semi-closed, it would have a couple supports, whereas fully closed, it would be fully enclosed, but have small patches for coolant and oil.
This open deck design is somewhat of an Achilles heel of these Volvo Whiteblock engines for super high horsepower applications. And often people will support the block with shims, a block guard, or even Darton sleeves. However, for the average driver, this is a non-issue.
One somewhat common problem with these early 5-cylinders are burnt valves. That does happen. The cool part is a lot of Volvo owners are, they're kind of a little, well, they are what they are, but when they burn a valve, they'll just pull the injector plug out and just keep driving it another 100,000 miles. Trust me, I know people that have done that.
Well, at least these have hydraulic lash adjusters.
Yeah.
So when the seat starts wearing,
It just moves with it,
exactly, it doesn't start to,
increase more
or
wear.
decrease the lash, which in turn leads to burnt valves.
Yeah. So maybe
So this at least has that going for it.
Yeah.
Next up was to spin the engine around so we can remove the oil pan.
Oh my goodness. Oh dear heaven. Oh, poor thing.
After zipping off the bolts and removing the oil filter, the pan comes off. This is often the ugliest part of an engine, and ours again was no surprise. It definitely was pretty gunky, with a bit of oil staining and just typical age, but nothing we wouldn't be surprised to see, especially with 300,000 miles. We did, however, notice some foreign material at the bottom of the oil pan.
Definitely 300,000 miles down here.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Wow.
You can just smell old,
Look at the
engine. How does the
yeah.
pickup screen look?
Pickup screen looks. Yeah. It's a little, great.
Oh, you can see the sludge on the bottom too.
There's some sludge in the screen, Cory.
Yeah, there's some.
Oh, actually, you know what? Now that I
there's
just
some
poked my finger in there, it's
sludge
not
on
bad.
the bottom of the pan. Okay.
Inside the pan, you'll find the oil pickup. Volvo had revised this oil pickup tube a number of times on the RN versions of the Whiteblock, along with the entire oil pan itself, with the addition of an oil cooler and better baffling.
Definitely old. All right, let's get some rod caps off. All right, we'll rotate the motor this way a little bit.
Oh, oil's gonna come out. Whew.
What really surprised us was the condition of the rod bearings.
Oh my God,
It looks
looks
brand new.
great.
Oh my gosh. What the heck? Was this thing rebuilt?
Well, let's wait for the loaded side.
Yeah.
Wow. This looks better than the Subaru with 20,000 miles.
Eat your heart out, JR. Your S54 bearings. They gotta be changed every.
Wow.
That's actually really amazing. It looks like I just pulled this bearing off the shelf. This has got 300,000 miles on it. So I don't even know what to say at this point, but Volvo, we love you.
A little bit of junk in the oil rings.
Oh, junk in the oil rings, no problem.
You see the sludge?
Yeah, there is a little bit of junk.
A little bit of sludge in there.
Even the loaded side of the rod bearings looked in basically perfect condition.
The loaded side of the rod bearing, phenomenal.
This engine would go another 300,000 miles easily.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of sludge
In the oil control
in
ring.
the control ring right there.
Yeah.
But the other rings still rotate nice and freely. You know, there's minimal, a
A little bit of scoring on there.
little bit of scoring. I'm impressed.
After removing all the rod caps and pushing the pistons and rods out of the block, we were able to see some bearings that had some more wear than others, as well as some damage that looked to be caused by some oil contaminants that got caught there and rolled around the journal.
So you see these straight lines running through the bearing. So
Something wrote on there.
something got caught in here and wrote on the journal. Little teeny tiny particulate. It doesn't take much.
All of this shows the importance of using high quality oil and oil filters and replacing them frequently. Another weak point on these engines, especially these early N blocks, are the rods themselves. Again, this is only an issue for high horsepower builds, not a daily driver.
Well, let's unbolt this guy.
Now it's time to remove the crankshaft girdle bolts, along with pressing out the crank gear and removing the oil pump. We took a quick detour taking apart the oil pump to take a look at the gears, and everything looked to be in good order.
Yeah, there's not a ton of wear.
After removing the crank girdle, we were able to take a look at the main bearings, which are more or less the same story as the other bearings.
Yeah, they're definitely worn.
So they're actually worn. So, like normal then.
Yeah.
Finally, we removed the heavy crankshaft from the block. All the main and rod journals were clean and smooth.
Oh, that's a heavy one. Some little stuff embedded in it, but
So there we have our disassembled 300,000 mile Volvo Whiteblock. Overall, we were pretty surprised at how clean this engine was inside, despite how ugly it was outside. For normal daily driving, I have no doubts this engine would have easily gone another 100,000 miles. However, the abuse an engine is put under with track driving is a totally different story. Overall, We're glad we replaced the engine, especially considering the abuse that we'll be putting the 850 through. I know some of you guys are upset that we took out a perfectly good engine, and you may be somewhat right, but don't worry, this engine will live on. Probably is a nice coffee table. Anyway, thanks for watching. We hope you learned something. We sure did. And yeah, catch us soon for season 2 of the 850 project.